we got to bump that to 51.9, 52 million. There's some things in there that we can't, feel good about covering. So why'd we use general before? When our school burnt down, we were on a fast plane. The challenge was on my shoulders because everyone told me those kids would be out of school 6 weeks. I said to the board, that won't happen. So I went with the principal of the middle school and high school on a Saturday, and we were there 15 hours, and we said, we don't come out of this room until we've figured out how we're gonna make this thing work. It wasn't real pleasant to figure out, what are you gonna do with 900 kids displaced? But it worked, and 3 days later, they were back in school. But the architects, thanks heaven, were already hired for this project, and so we could use them for that one. And so we put them in high gear. We didn't have time to bring in CMs and do what we need them to do, is help us budget, help us do all the things traditionally that their service provides, and nor did we have time to do what we're doing now, and that is, as they said, meet in this room, which I meet with them every month for a half a day with all of the heads, their people, as well as the architects and the construction people that they want to bring in, and the landscape architects and anyone else, so that they have an agenda and we do a progress report. Then I add my feelings saying, Angie, I want you to do this, or when they go through this, the guy that's on the site says, here's our progress, then I brought up to snuff on where it is. As Doug says, it does take a lot of time. I tell my board that 20% of my time now is strictly construction oriented. So 1 day out of my 5-day work week, which really 6-day, but 1 day out of my 5-day work week is devoted strictly for this project. And the reason, again, general was used is didn't have time. Now this project in Purple Sage, we had time. Interesting, when I was hired here from Marsing, they had run a bond and the bond failed, and then the superintendent retired. So then when they hired me, they told me that for your first task, Rich, is to get this bond to pass, the Purple Sage bond. And I had about 3.5 months to do it. So that pressure, the stress level on me was great because they hired me for my ability for facilities, but had a lot of problems with everything that was run to how it was done, and they had a real problem with the people that lived right around Purple Sage were up in arms with the school district. So I worked on that literally 18-hour days for weeks to get that thing to pass, and it did pass, sailed through. That was my first real hurdle, saying that, that bond went through. And we changed the scope. In the first scope, Robin didn't have a gym in her school setting that was left out. So I had to look at that and say, what did we run? Was it enough money? And unfortunately, we added $3.5 million to the scope that failed. And anytime you do that, that's unheard of. I told the same thing in Valley View when that thing failed. Every time that failed, I said, you know what, we have to add to that, because if you diminish that thing, then you get on a roll and people say to you, how much fluff did you have in that thing now that you're going the other way? And that happens. So that is short. These guys, though, run the system, and they're going to talk a little bit about, Doug talked about change orders, and he'll talk about our budget on this project here and how they were the drivers of all the change orders. They bring me literally probably each week we had a stack of change orders this thick that I would sign.
We want to be able to explain that.
Owner initiated.
Yeah, thank you.
There's a difference in whether they're architect provided, changes that they've made errors in, or whether they're owner initiated. And these in 90%, 95% were my initiated. I saw things that we had. So I want you to talk a little bit about budgeting and change orders.
Glad to.
Can I just mention real quick, with this piece, you mentioned briefly that we went with the design builder on the new high school
General.
rebuild, the general, and seeing the difference between the two from here and reading. I was reading chapter 4 to put me to sleep last night. And it was talking about predicting how long before and how many years in the building process. We had 1 year to rebuild that high school from start to finish, and they completed it in a year, but I think that's unheard of. And they had to keep it on the same footprint, which was an old footprint, but they redesigned the inside, and so to redo all of that and have it built and ready to enter in a year, I guess just reading that chapter and then listening to what you're saying and why, it really kind of hit home and how quick that really was, and that turnaround.
That makes good sense, and it made very good sense at that time. The architectural firm had to put all their time and effort into getting the drawings done. What we want to try to explain today on the construction management end of things is the value of having the time up front to be able to go through the steps and figure out what is going to be the best product for you, what are the best choices. We're not here to tell you what to do, we're here to give you options. And control, we put together a master schedule right at the very beginning. So the design professionals have set dates to get things met. The owners, there are things that you'll be required to meet as well. When is your homework due, for example? When are we ready to provide? So we would provide, from the very beginning, the construction managers can provide conceptual budgets for a footprint. And that's what Rich was talking about early on this project. How many hundreds of thousands of square feet is a building? Is there going to be an auditorium? How big is the gymnasium? And then you throw some conceptual numbers, and Doug can speak to this because that's really where how Doug handles this stuff a lot more than I do. I like to see the thing go up, but
Well,
that process.
that's right. We start out with a basic design of footprint. You start with square footage, how many square feet can you build a building or a school for, and then you start getting into the specifics. You know, auditorium, how big, what other kind of facilities do you want for the gymnasium, practice gymnasiums, your outdoor facilities, and you start out with what you're experienced with, what your experience has been in the past, what the market's doing at the present time, and you get a feel for the overall project by putting all those different elements into it, and then you start refining them as long as you think the budget, you know, is still going to comply. You keep going, refining the drawings. We start getting input from subcontractors. They like to be actively involved in the budgeting, even though they know it's going to go out to bid. But they are very instrumental in helping us get good budgets on these things. And you just work through the process. At the same time, we're working with the state, plan review elements, and the local city for building permits, infrastructure requirements, sewer, water, electrical, that sort of thing. This project, we had a myriad of those. Sewer line extensions, wells, redoing roadways all around the school. And we're able to, you know, by working with the city and the owner, we're able to make sure that we have all those items covered in the budget when it does go out to bid.
We'll give you a real life example on the Purple Sages. I think of 2002, 2003 when we worked on Purple Sage, as well as the high school additions in Robbins Building, the gymnasium. Purple Sage is not on city utilities. It's a remote site, so there had to be a well had to be drilled, and a septic system with a sequential batch reactor and actual sewage system had to be put in. The well, and if anybody has ever been involved with a well, you don't really know what you have until it's drilled and it tests out. The permitting and all those different options, they take time. So we had an architect group, did a very nice job on Purple Sage. We had an architect group working on the other buildings, did a very nice job. Both of them wanted to put everything they could in. We had almost $1 million of what's the well going to cost. That got bigger and bigger and bigger as the requirements ended up with a requirement of 2,500 gallons per minute, and it had to test out of that. So until it actually does, you can't spend the money if you have to drill additional wells. The budgets we were able to help control the budgets on the entire project between both architects. The Purple Sage School had a very nice product. It's called a big brick or a large brick. That was pulled out of the project, and a veneer CMU, it's a less expensive but it still looks very nice product, was installed. Saved about $250,000, I think, to change from one to the other. At the end of the day, it's a good thing we did that, and we provided the option. The district decided to take that. The well came in at a cost at the end of the day that we needed the $250,000, so the savings kept everything. The budget was all able to